Hello, everybody. Growing up, I ended up with a lot of albums that were adorned with white and blue labels, which was the signature label for the Blue Note Recording Company. That did, at that time, he's talking about the early middle 60s, everything jazz. That was my world. I recently had a chance to go back and do a little research on this wonderful company. And that was triggered by work I had done researching for the Village Vanguard piece that I did a while ago. So it turns out that this major company that didn't start out so major was started by Jewish immigrants. That's right, I said it, immigrants who came from Germany, primarily because in 1936, 37, those were not good years to be Jewish in Germany. But they got out and came here. And Alfred Lyon was the first. 1937, he had the idea. Shortly after that, Max Margolis, who knew Alfred from Germany. They grew up together, lived in the same neighborhood. He moved to New York and helped to finance Alfred's dream. And then later, Francis Wolff, Frank, came over from the same neighborhood a couple years later, 1939. By this time, Alfred and Max already had a company. And they were trying to set up their first recording. And there was a big concert introducing jazz to polite society. The concerts were a series of artists, both black and white, which was in itself revolutionary in New York in the 30s. It was called From Spirituals to Swing. And that was their cue. Hey, let's record that music because no one's paying attention. We can get in on the ground level, baby. And that is what they did. And so they pulled two friends, like they were friends, so why not bring friends in? From Chicago, Mr. Albert Ammons and his friend, Meade Lux Lewis. They had been great friends since they were little kids. They actually visited each other all the time so they could practice piano together, sitting side by side. And they did this from the time they were little kids until they were full-grown men. And then one by one they moved to New York, and these two German immigrants discovered them. And their first recording for Blue Note Records was Lux and Albert Ammons. Lux had a nickname because he was a character. He would put on a beard and act like a bourgeois, whatever, and his friends called him the Duke of Luxembourg, after his middle name, Lux. Well, they got together with those pianos and they were recorded, and Blue Note Records was off and running. Friends, recording Friends, making this new music. Soon after, they discovered the legendary Sidney Bechet, who had been a New Orleans clarinet player who didn't enjoy the clarinet because it wasn't loud enough, so he switched to soprano saxophone, probably our first real soprano saxophone player, and he wanted to record a ballad, something that was a very popular song. Wasn't nothing wrong with the song. The song was Summertime. But for some reason, Sidney Bechet could not get a proper record company to touch him with a 10-foot pole. I wonder why. But Blue Note Records was just getting started. Blue Note Records was called Blue Note Records because if you know anything about jazz, you know that there are notes that musicians refer to as blue notes. If you play any one of these notes in any key, you're going to sound like the blues. The flat 3, the flat 5, the flat 7, if you're Miles Davis, the flat 9. Those are the blue notes. So the company was named after the bluest notes in jazz at that time. They were serious about it. And so for the first few years of their existence, they were simply chronicling, preserving the sounds of earlier times, the sounds of the 20s and 30s, and maybe early 40s. Those musicians, the early cats, the New Orleans cats, some of the swing cats, but those swing bands, all small combo stuff. Matter of fact, they started out with such humble beginnings that the first studio they used to record the piano duet was a rented studio. They didn't even have a studio. Yeah, they started with nothing. But this formula worked. No one was doing what they were doing, and this music was attracting a larger and larger audience. Man, it was great. So from 1939 right through most of the 40s, they were recording what I would call older music, older artists, people like James P. Johnson, stride piano and stuff like that, boogie woogie. But in 1947, things changed. Someone, probably a couple of people, both women that I've done these stop time videos on, encouraged Mr. Lyon to record this strange man and his strange music with a strange name. His name was Thelonious Spear Monk. And so they recorded him like 5 albums. And just like his earlier concerts, nobody came. Those first 5 records, nobody bought them. They matter of fact, they didn't even release them. There wasn't enough interest to release them. But they're visionaries. They hold on to it. And 10 years later, to this present time, those first 5 recordings have become recognized as the best examples of Monk's earlier work in existence. These guys were visionaries. They could see and hear the future. And this was 1947. Something else happened. They hired a drummer to help out. And that drummer's name was Art Blakey. And man, Art Blakey, hello. He would later join with Horace Silver, and form a collective known as the Jazz Messengers. Yes, the Messengers. What a group that is, huh? And the Messengers and Art Blakey stayed with Blue Note for, 25 years off and on. 25 years. Now, 1947 is also the year that a 17-year-old Miles Davis first walked onto the stage with Charlie Parker, Bird, to launch a new era in music called bebop. And once again, Alfred Lion, Max Margolis, they're right there on the scene, looking at where the music is going, checking out the people who are making this music and making sure that they document it in wax. Yeah. By 1951, we're actually making vinyl records, but they're only 10 inches. You can't get a lot of music on there. You can get a whole lot more music on a 12-inch disc, and within 4 or 5 years, the 12-inch vinyl disc replaced the 10s. But this is a very small company, and they almost went out of business because all their investments and all their catalogs were on the old format. But since they were attracting cutting-edge artists, they had the wherewithal to make music that people were going to buy and listen to. So rather than having to sell or go bankrupt, they kept making records until they had enough money to update to the new technology at that time. More and more new artists showed up. The great J.J. Johnson, first trombone player to play bebop. Miles Davis is now on his own. He started to make records. They're there with that as well. Oh yeah. As the 50s roll around, we're moving from bebop, and they were all over the bebop, to what we call post-bop, or hard bop. Freddie Hubbard and people like that, Clifford Brown, are coming on board. Yeah, a lot of saxophone players are coming on board. 60s hit, and although jazz took a little bit of a hit with the rock and roll explosion and pop festivals and all that, true jazz lovers stayed with the jazz. So Blue Note survived all that and kept adding artists. And then by 63, they had something great happen to them when they really needed it. They discovered an organ player, that's right, a Hammond B3 organ player from just outside Philadelphia who was going to revolutionize this music. His name was Jimmy Smith. And he was going to play a new kind of jazz that we would call soul jazz, because it's kind of like hard bop, but it's got a whole lot of blues in it, a whole lot of gospel in it, and a whole lot of R&B, man. You can shake your head, you can dance, you can groove, it's happening. They signed him immediately, and he was so popular, so revolutionary, that all of a sudden, all of their financial problems were gone. Add to the mix the fact that they had some inspired musicians. They got Lee Morgan in there. And Lee Morgan had a big hit in 1963 called The Sidewinder. This hit was so big that for the first time, HBCU marching bands were playing Sidewinder on the field. It was like a rock and roll piece or something, man. Everybody loved it. It had a catchy beat. You could dance to it. You could sing it. It was happening, man. Oh, yeah. And not long after that, Horace Silver had a hit called Song for My Father. Catchy rhythm. A lot of blues, R&B involved in there. Great soloists. And guess what? Sold like hotcakes. And so now the companies that are distributing all of this Blue Note product are going, hey, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. We need more of that stuff that you're doing. So now they got to find more artists who can start an album with a groovy tune, get people listening, and all you need is one of those on an album, and it will sell. And that became their formula going forward. That catchy tune brings them in the door, make them put their money down. That was the thing. Now, there were other movements. Yes, you had the hard bop and the post bop. The great Dexter Gordon emerges around 1960. Let's just say we had him detained for a while. Dexter had some habits that the law enforcement people didn't approve of, so they decided to take him off the street and put him in a cage for a while, a long while. People had forgotten that Dexter even existed. But when he came out, he went straight to Blue Note. He may have been a junkie for a long time, but he didn't completely destroy his brain. And they put him on an album with some young cats. And that album had a couple of hits on it, and next thing you know, Dexter was back. Dexter's habits stayed around for a little while longer, and he grew impatient with the racial climate. So after a few years, Dexter left the country, went to Europe. And Blue Notes, in their infinite wisdom, followed him to Europe and recorded him there as well. And those albums became, how shall I say this, some of the most prized possessions a saxophone player could have. I remember I loved Joe Henderson, and one of my friends was an organ player and sax player, and he actually traded me one of my favorite Joe Henderson albums for a Dexter album, The Cat. And I didn't care that much for it. I wasn't into Dexter like that, but he was. Saxophone players loved him. Dexter was back. Dexter went on to make movies and won Emmys and Grammys and all kind of stuff. Dexter was back thanks to Blue Note Records. Blue Note changed with the times. As the fusion thing hit and more music started getting plugged into walls and amplifiers and all that, Blue Note stayed right there, but they were diversified. They kept recording the older stuff right through the 50s, and the newer hard bop and all that, they kept recording that to this very moment. They even went into the avant-garde, the really strange music, free jazz, all that, Arnett Coleman, Cecil Taylor on piano. Oh man, just anybody that was playing free jazz at that time, even Sonny Fortune tried it for a while. Those people could record at Blue Note, right alongside the more traditional people. Oh yeah, Eric Dolphy was right there with Blue Note, because they allowed him to have the freedom he needed to do his explorations. Did I mention that the other thing that Blue Note did that no one else did, two things that made them so successful. Two things. They brought in Rudy Van Gelder, who was a legendary producer and recording engineer who had his studio just outside the bridge on the New York side of the river. They brought him in. He was working for a lot of people, but he ended up doing more work for Blue Note than anyone else. And his sound, his touch, the clarity, the realism of the instruments, everything was just perfect. Everyone wanted Rudy on the knobs when they recorded. Well, they got Rudy working with them. Not only that, Rudy understood musicians, and so did these guys. So they would schedule recording sessions at 3 in the morning. Why? Musicians are like vampires. They sleep all day because they play all night. And so they would go and they would play their gigs, get off 1, 2 in the morning, and then go to the studio and record an album, and then go home and get some sleep. But Alfred Lion and the boys, they had a hook to it. Number one, they would pay the musicians to come in and rehearse the material one day before they recorded it, so the Blue Note recordings were a whole lot more perfect than people walking in the studio and just recording things with one take. They didn't do that. They're going to rehearse it, get it as perfect as possible, and then they're going to record it. The other thing they did is they want musicians to be relaxed and record and whatnot before recording. So they had some liquid refreshment for adults on site at all times. So musicians would leave their gig where they couldn't drink a whole lot because you standing up there playing for 3 or 4 hours. They would come to make a recording and they would be met with a glass of their favorite, whatever it is they like, to get them in the mood to swing again. Yeah, they even have food for them. So yeah, you come there and it's like a party, and then you make a recording. So there's a whole lot of joy in it. And since they'd already rehearsed for a whole day, it was an easy recording session, very few mistakes, even though they were slightly altered, just slightly. Blue Note. Friends. Letting friends making music and documenting it. This was their whole operation. Where Miles Davis had one of his most celebrated quintets before he took time off. He had Herbie Hancock, who was an artist that Blue Note took a note of. Herbie stayed with him a number of years as well, with his great tunes like Watermelon Man and whatnot. Yeah, Maiden Voyage. Yes, that's all Blue Note. Tony Williams played drums. And when the avant-garde and the fusions came along, the electric stuff, Tony Williams had his own band called Lifetime. They kept that going. Ron Carter, the great bass player, was also a part of Miles' group. And in the wisdom of the Blue Note folks, they also used Miles' group as the rhythm section for many of the young artists that they were producing and introducing to a wider audience. So they had a rhythm section that played together in the studio and live all around the world, so they knew each other to come in and cut these records with new artists. You couldn't get any better than that. That's wisdom. They also had this unique packaging thing where all of their album covers were designed by professional artists. Reed was a guy who was educated in art school in California. He brought his photography and hand-drawn illustrations in. Another friend was a great photographer, and they would mix photographs of the musicians in the recording studio while recording, headphones on, everything. with other graphics to make these unique album covers. So when you walk into a record store, your first thing you see are these Blue Note exciting covers, and you are drawn to them. Smart. And it became one of the most unique things about the Blue Note product. The album covers themselves was artwork. Everything they did was about art, friendship, and the love of this music. And they stayed viable. They stayed up with the times, including right up till today. Robert Glasper, who mixes all sorts of music together with a jazz nucleus. Blue Note. The biggest seller of recordings in the 21st century came through Blue Note. That's Nora Jones, by the way. So here these guys are launching this company with meager beginnings in 1939. And here we are in 2025, and they're still relevant and in many ways leading the industry. Did I mention hip hop and sampling? The Blue Note catalog is the most sampled catalog in existence for hip hop and rap. People like Dr. Dre, all the time, the biggest names in hip hop, are sampling Blue Note right now. And Blue Note is still going out and finding the cutting edge new artists to make them stars. Alfred Lion is gone. Margolis is gone. Rudy Van Gelder is gone. All these legendary people who started this idea are gone. But as the company has grown and been traded and sold and expanded, somehow, no matter how big the corporate footprint has been, the central idea behind Blue Note, we love this music, which is why we call it Blue Note, baby. It's essential to jazz. This is a friendly operation, and we're going to make sure that we keep things friendly here and familiar, and we're going to keep up with every development in jazz, whether we like it or not, and we're going to document it. We are going to become the Library of Congress for all things jazz. That is the legacy of Blue Note Records. Thank you very much. I hope you'll go out, because you need to buy Blue Note. They have reissued. You can go out and get stuff that was recorded in the 50s right now, as well as the newer artists like Robert Glasper and Nora Jones. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thank you very much.